We have breaking news for you tonight, some sad news. We've just learned that President George H.W. Bush has died. He was 94, the oldest president in history. Bush 41, you'll remember, spent his summer at his home in Kennebunkport, Maine. He returned in October back to Texas, where his spokesman had said the president was really looking forward to some proper Tex-Mex. A day after the funeral of his wife, Barbara Bush, in April, the former president checked into a hospital in Houston with an infection. He went home about 2 weeks later. Bush 41 had a form of Parkinson's disease. Doctors had also treated him for pneumonia and other infections over the years. George Herbert Walker Bush was born on June 12, 1924 in Milton, Massachusetts, just south of Boston. He was a decorated U.S. Navy pilot who flew torpedo bombers. He survived being shot down during World War II. He was an amazing hero. He met Barbara Pierce at a Christmas dance when they were just teenagers. They got married in 1945 when he was home on leave from the war. Their letters back and forth to each other are amazing if you've read some of those. He later graduated from Yale University, then moved with Barbara to Texas to work in the oil business. And that is where he eventually got into politics. He became a congressman. He ran for president in 1980. Remember, he lost the Republican nomination to Ronald Reagan, but became his vice president. And finally, 8 years later, he took the oath of office himself as commander-in-chief. Remember this, a lot of foreign policy achievements on his watch. The Berlin Wall came down and the Soviet Union collapsed. When Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, President Bush led an international coalition that defeated the Iraqi forces. He also started the Points of Light Foundation to promote community service across the country, really around the world. After leaving the White House, former First Lady Barbara Bush started her own charity to help more people learn to read. She was all about literacy. They were married 73 years, longer than any other first couple in history. They had 6 children, including a daughter who died of leukemia when she was just 3 years old. They've talked about how heartbreaking and difficult that was for their family. Their eldest son, George W. Bush, became the 43rd president of the United States. In total, they had 17 grandchildren, 8 great-grandchildren. After Barbara Bush died, her husband said she would want life to go on. He also said, quote, "So cross the Bushes off your worry list." Well, now tonight, they are together again. George H.W. Bush, the 41st president of the United States, dead tonight at 94. By the way, we're just getting a statement in from his son, President George W. Bush. He says, Jeb, Neil, Marvin, Doro, and I are saddened, all the siblings, to announce that after 94 remarkable years, our dear dad has died. George H.W. Bush was a man of the highest character and the best dad a son or daughter could ask for. The entire Bush family is deeply grateful for 41's life and love, for the compassion of those who have cared and prayed for Dad, and for the condolences of our friends and fellow citizens. Again, President George H.W. Bush, our 41st president, dead tonight at the age of 94. As we think back on all he accomplished, I mentioned there the foreign policy, and a lot of folks who have followed the Bush 41 presidency and written about it and thought about it in the years since his time in the White House say that will indeed be what he is remembered most for. Important meetings, tearing down important barriers on the international stage. He was a statesman. He was a diplomat. He was the head of the CIA at one point. He had worked across the board, around the globe, in trying to build important alliances and trying to make great changes that have lasted for a generation on. We will always remember his contribution to this country. And he, again, from 1924 to 2018, graced this earth with his presence. A war hero. We talked about his time as a Navy pilot. If you've ever read into the stories of what he survived after being shot down, it reminds us of what a real hero is, somebody who is tough and somebody who battled on. And of course, the great love affair with his wife, Barbara Bush, who died earlier this year. It is one that takes your breath away when you read their letters back and forth. You look at the origins of their start and what they went through as a family, what they suffered in losing a child and in going through many, many ups and downs, difficult campaigns that didn't always go their way. There were many times that they had each other's backs in a way that nobody else could have. They were fierce defenders of each other and of their family, their children, their grandchildren. Earlier this summer, you may remember that one of his granddaughters was married, Barbara Bush. They're in Kennebunkport, and she said it was very important for her to be there, have him there with her on her special day. I believe we have Brad Blakeman on the phone with us tonight. Brad, this is sad news. I'm sure that you have many, many memories, fond ones, of our 41st president.
Oh, absolutely. He was a statesman. He was a gentleman. He served our country in so many capacities over so many years and leaves a legacy that would be honorable for anybody to follow in his footsteps. The youngest fighter pilot in World War II, elected to Congress, served as RNC chair, first envoy to China. I mean, his life is full of giving back and service. I had the honor of working with Vice President Bush, President Bush, and then, of course, his son. And the entire family is an amazing family. They are so close and tight and loving, and the president loved America. He loved his family, and he lived a life for this country.
He did, and you know, a lot of folks, there's so many different things about him when we look back, and a lot of people forget that he had some tough campaigns he didn't win, and he's talked about those and how they prepared him for the next steps. But he also had a very amazing chapter at the CIA that was critical and really paid dividends down the line in where he served further on in the government.
Absolutely. I don't think we've ever had a president that was more qualified to serve. He had so many critical roles at critical times in our history, bringing our country together after Watergate. As you point out, critical time in the CIA, our intelligence community, serving as vice president for Ronald Reagan when he took on the Soviet Union and the wall came down when George H.W. Bush was president. First envoy to China, opening up an entire relationship that is now blossomed into a China that is not only a competitor of the United States, but is also a friend of the United States. So this family has done so much. And, of course, Barbara Bush was every bit the partner of President Bush. They were inseparable. And, of course, we mourned her loss this year as well. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we're just so saddened, but we're also gladdened by the fact that we got to know him and got to work for him, had the honor of serving him in our country, and knowing that, first and foremost, he was decent. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, he didn't care. He cared about service and honor, and that's the Bush legacy.
And Brad, if you'll stand by with us, we want to talk some more about his life and legacy. Thank you for joining us, if you'll stand by. This is breaking news. I'm Shannon Bream at Fox News World Headquarters in New York. President George H.W. Bush has died. He was 94, the oldest president in history. Bush 41 spent the summer at his home in Kennebunkport, Maine, which he loved so much. He talked about how happy he was to be there, but returned in October to Texas, where his spokesman had said the president was looking forward to some, quote, proper Tex-Mex. A day after the funeral of his wife, Barbara Bush, in April, the former president checked into a hospital in Houston with an infection. He did go home a couple of weeks later. He's had trouble all along. Bush 41 had a form of Parkinson's disease. Doctors had also treated him for pneumonia and some other infections in recent years. George Herbert Walker Bush was born on June 12, 1924, in Milton, Massachusetts, just south of Boston.